Is there a doctor in the house?
Doctor, you have a visitor in the main lobby.
Hello, and welcome to the Talk of the Doc podcast, where we explore how business leaders are tackling, I would say, one of today's toughest challenges, and that's the growing gap between talent, training, and the real-world job market. I'm your host, Steve, the Dr. Meek, and the doctor is in. Our guest today is Mike Saylor. He's CEO of Blackswan and has a whole bunch of other things that I think you'll love to hear about, just because it's so innovative, so new, a little bit different, something to think about. So let's go ahead and get into it. Welcome, Mike. Could you tell our audience just a little bit more about yourself today?
Sure, and thanks for having me. 30 years in IT and cyber, 26 years as a professor. I currently teach for UT San Antonio, Weatherford College, North Central Texas College. I help institutions build academic programs while also running a nonprofit called the U.S. Cyber Defense Center, in the hopes of kind of building some standardization and some opportunities to get people into the cyber workforce faster. And that's what I wrote my dissertation on. So in my doctoral program, and it was a qualitative study that lasted a year. So I interviewed a ton of people, job seekers, hiring managers, HR people, academics, to try and figure out where the disconnects are that have led to this big gap between resources and, I should say the perceived gap between resources and jobs. So happy to dig into that as we talk.
I love that, and let that be a lesson to your kids. Mike just rattled off like 5 hats that he's wearing. So if you find something you really enjoy, something you're passionate about, obviously he wrote his dissertation on it, so he had an interest beforehand. It doesn't feel like work. So a good lesson there for you. Find something that you actually enjoy and that you're passionate about, and the days will go by quickly if you're getting to do something you enjoy. Something I like to do at the start of my podcast is get into kind of some vitals, kind of some numbers of the industry and stuff. And one of the things I noticed, just thinking about the pulse of the market, kind of what the current state of things are. I think I saw something like, it was like cybersecurity jobs continue to outpace by far the available workers out there. Could you talk a little bit about that, Mike?
Sure. Well, I think there's, and going back to that study I did, there's a lot of different perspectives and influences on this situation.
Sure.
So we've got people that want to get into cyber but don't know how. So there's not enough mentorships, internships, ways to align personality and the person with the different jobs that are out there. And Hollywood doesn't do us any favors, right? Because a lot of people want to get into cyber. They want to be a hacker, right, or work in a crime lab. I mean, those are really the only 2 things you see on TV related to cyber. There's tons of other jobs, and there's a job for everybody in cyber if you can find the right mentor and develop the appropriate path. But sorry, so that's one problem, is that the job seekers or the job interest isn't fully fleshed out. And so then there's a misalignment there's already a misalignment with the job that's posted on the internet. All right, so the job says entry level with 5 years of experience. Well, how in the heck am I going to get 5 years of experience if I'm looking for an entry level job? Well, some of that is the problem of the hiring organization. So let's just say I am the company that needs a cyber person. Do I even know how to define that job? And where do I go to figure that out? Is there a website? Is there a resource? Is there a book I can read that says I need this person to do these things, and that means it's an analyst job or an engineer job or a data scientist or whatever? So how do I know what to call the job based on the tasks and objectives I need that person to achieve? There is one, but in my studies, 0% of the people I interviewed knew about it. even though it's been around for a while and it's actually managed by the U.S. government. Very good framework. I'll get into that later. But all right, so there's that problem. Hiring manager, and I don't know what I need, or I do, but I don't know what to call it. And so then I just Google it, right? So find me a job description for these things. And 9.5 times out of 10, hiring organizations are just plagiarizing what somebody else wrote, including the qualifications. And so hiring manager, probably okay with someone that's never done the job before. Maybe they're willing to train or send you to training, but the job they posted out there says 5 years of experience. So that already doesn't align with newcomers. And so that's called self-disqualification. It says 5 years, so I'm not going to apply for it. Well, you could have applied for it and maybe you've gotten an interview, but we didn't because it said 5 years. Or a bachelor's degree, or some list of certifications. All right, so there's that. Well, then, all right, so I want to get into cyber, so I'm going to go to school for that. So now I'm going to college, university, and they're telling me that I've got to take these classes, and those classes lead to certifications, and then both of those together are going to help me get a job, but even after which I don't have any experience. So I spent 4 years getting, 2 or 4 years, depending where you go, getting this credential. Well, that was 2 or 4 years I could have spent getting entry-level experience on a help desk or somewhere, but no one was there to mentor me and guide me on a path based on who I am and where I want to go. So you can already see how complicated the disconnects are. All right, well then, when we look at current job force, so maybe I'm a cybersecurity person today and I've been in this role for 5 years, but I really haven't improved myself. I haven't learned anything new. I haven't excelled at my job. I've just been here for 5 years. So I get promoted from analyst 1 to analyst 2. Well, now I think I can go find another analyst 2 job somewhere and probably make more money. And so now what happens is you get hired or you apply for jobs as an analyst 2, thinking you're qualified for that just because your title changed at your current company to accommodate your tenure. So now we're, I don't know, falsely promoting people based on tenure and time and grade or pay raises, not their skills and personal development in that role. And so now you've got analyst 2 people unemployed in the workforce saying, I can't find a job. Well, it's because they're applying for analyst 2 jobs when they're really an analyst 1. And then the last part of that is in Texas, there's all these jobs out there that are going unfilled and they're classified as cyber jobs, but they're really not. And so what happens is I'm a small business or medium-sized business even, and I need an IT person and a cyber person, but the company only approves one role. So what am I going to call that? Probably going to call it a cyber job.
I think that, the disconnect between employers and employees pre-COVID was enough to be a lot, but post-COVID, it just seems like we're all over the place. Some organizations are, expecting too much. Some job seekers are expecting too much. Some are, it just seems like there's this huge disconnect and we're really struggling to get the two back together to where it's the right person in the right role at the right pay with the right skills, kind of a thing. Is that kind of your feeling as well?
And I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's another good point. We've interviewed a lot of people that did have the wrong expectation or the wrong understanding. So maybe they've got their degree, and we've interviewed people with graduate level degrees in computer science and cybersecurity, but no experience. Nonetheless, they feel like I've got a master's degree, I should be getting paid more than someone without a degree, but that person has more experience. So I'll say cyber is essentially a trade. It's like welding and heating and air conditioning. It doesn't matter how long you went to school. It's how much you've actually applied that knowledge and done things. And so no one wants to hire a cybersecurity person that's never had to do cybersecurity stuff before. I equate it similarly to like a bodyguard. And so if you're going to hire a bodyguard to protect you and your family, and your options are bodyguard A that has every credential in bodyguard protection and weapons training and all the things that you would think of maybe out of a James Bond or military movie, but today's his first day. He's never done this before. And you compare that then to somebody that maybe doesn't have any formal training, but he's been doing it for 5 or 6 years. Which one would you pick to protect you and your family? I think I'd protect the guy that's done it before.
Right.
right? Similar, very similar to cyber. Companies don't want to hire someone that hasn't done it before. We don't want you to learn by making mistakes with us. We'd rather you make your mistakes somewhere else. And then, add to that, to your point, I think there is a misalignment with expectations on pay and work-life balance is another one. In cyber, it's a 24-hour job. So very, very, very likely you're going to start on the day shift while we train you, but then you're going to end up in the nights and weekends shifts. And so you've got to kind of put in your time during those hours that, you might prefer doing something else like partying or sleeping or reading a book. Right. And then the pay, I think, is another one, especially for those that invested in college or trade school type approaches. They want to get their money. They think that their value is in the money that they paid into being taught some of these theories and concepts. And so I think their expectation for pay is kind of elevated.
I think just from what I've heard, and definitely you're more of an expert in this sector than I am, but the cost of college continues to go up, and there's more people are looking for opportunities outside of just a 4-year big name college kind of opportunity, just because of the high cost of getting into it and then trying to recoup that. I think the number that I looked at was something like the U.S. had over 660,000 unfilled cyber positions this year. Just kind of by itself, and that's a lot of roles, but that's also probably a lot of entry level roles getting started, as you mentioned before.
Sure, and I'll say too, part of my study was on the value that hiring organizations put in a cybersecurity degree. So whether it's an associate's, a bachelor's, or a master's degree, less than 30% of hiring organizations put value in a cybersecurity degree. Not because they didn't think cybersecurity was important or wasn't important, but it's because they see the misalignment again. So there's no standard in cybersecurity education. It's not like getting a degree in accounting. So you can get a degree in accounting from just about any school, and I'm pretty comfortable that I know what you learned in that accounting class. But that's because accounting has a governing body.
Right.
Cyber doesn't have a governing body. We have a framework, and it's called the NICE framework, or National Initiative for Cybersecurity Education. That framework doesn't flow into the requirements for standardized education. And so your degree from one school, even though it says cybersecurity, is likely to some degree different than that same degree from a different school. So Who knows what you learned, and how do I know how I can rely on that as a hiring organization?
Now, in addition to that, do you see any perception? I think that sometimes, smaller organizations, they see as the cost of protecting themselves, the cyber, as kind of an expense, a cost. And so they're kind of pursuing that lowest cost possible, versus they might look at an accountant like, hey, this guy has some real skills and he's going to be able to help us budget and do all these things that are going to help us on the top line revenue or help us with our planning and forecasting, those kinds of things. So do you ever see that there's a sense that cyber is an expense, but accounting or other roles, I'll pay more for them because they're helping, they're perceived as helping the business as opposed to a cost?
We do see that. We see it in a lot of ways. There's the indirect cost of cyber. So similar to insurance, right? You need insurance because you never know. Your risk appetite isn't as much as your bank account. So you want to outsource that risk. So you're going to invest in insurance. Well, similar to cyber, and this goes back to one of those observations I made during my study, is that cyber person, probably that's just one of the hats they wear. So they are going to hire someone that's more dynamic. They're not just a one-dimensional employee. They're not just your IT person. They're also cyber. Maybe they're also your accountant. It depends on how big your organization is. We've seen that. But then similar to small business outsourcing things like accounting or payroll, you can also outsource your cyber. So there is economies of scale by outsourcing to somebody that does it for more than one organization. So your cost goes down. And so very often signing up for a managed service on cyber is actually less expensive than hiring a full-time person dedicated to cyber. So there is that component. Well, then We've also seen where organizations they actually go through an exercise of weighing the risk. So a pipeline organization, or let's just take any regulated organization where if you're not compliant, and cyber is one of those areas where they do have defined compliance criteria. If you're not compliant, you're risking, a federal penalty, a regulatory penalty. And we see organizations go through that, and they'll ask us for a quote, and we'll say, your quote's $1, but the regulatory penalty is 75 cents. So we're just going to go with the risk that we're going to fail and get fined by the government and save 25 cents. So it does, and those were billion-dollar companies. That wasn't just a small company. So we've seen it across the board from large companies to small companies. It all comes down to education and awareness of the resources that are available to you, and understanding the risk to your organization. So that could be operational, reputational, regulatory. But I'll throw in there that less than half of small to medium-sized companies that incur a significant cybersecurity event stay in business. So it's a pretty big deal. It's not just your reputation. It's not just a fine. You're just not going to be able to continue doing business.
Now, how do you go about articulating that? Because I do think that gets swept under, well, it's not that it gets swept under the covers. It's just that people just don't know what they don't know. They don't comprehend the value of the investment in protecting themselves a lot of times until after they've gone through an event, which at that point, that cost is, I don't know, I've heard people throw out 50 times what it would have been if they'd have just handled it up front. How do you articulate that when you're interacting with people that, hey, I know you're wanting to save that 25 cents, but here's the full story. As Paul Harvey said, here's the rest of the story.
Right. Page 2, right? There's a couple of ways to do it. It depends on the personality of the person. So you're talking to a CEO versus a board member versus whoever's over the technology environment, and also the size of the company and any politics that may exist there. For example, if you're talking to the head of IT at a small company, he's less likely to be open to the idea of suggesting more resources and budget to his leadership because that makes him look less valuable. Sure. Right? He's wearing all the hats and he's the rock star, right? So you kind of have to read the room, and it takes someone that's been through bad situations to really articulate what could happen. You can read a book on recovering from ransomware as an example. By the way, I'm writing a book on how to recover from ransomware. Okay. To explain different situations, small, medium, large organizations, it's irrelevant compared to how prepared those organizations were for whatever the likely risk was. And so that's an exercise in self-awareness. So an organization needs to go through a couple of different exercises. One's called a business impact analysis. So you look at all the critical functions in your organization and how they contribute to your revenue and your operation, and the other influences in your company, reputation, financial, all these things. All right. Well, then the impact analysis part is, what if that one critical function wasn't able to function today? That person's not here. That system doesn't exist. The knowledge of how to do this job walked out the door. What impact would that have to the rest of the business, and how do you build redundancies or continuity around that? So that's one thing. So that's internal assessment. Well, then you need to look at the external influences. So obviously threat actors, but it could be market or geopolitical events. It could be your company just made the news for some reason, so now you're front of mind to people to try and see what they can do to you. Or maybe it's ideological, that you're doing something that some group of people aren't happy with and they want to impact that somehow. All right, well then, understanding all of those things, now you have these, maybe top 5 or 10 things that we have to worry about. And then you assess, well, what's the likelihood of those 10 things happening? And then what's the impact if they did happen? And what can we put in place to mitigate that impact or that likelihood? Right. So that's just a risk assessment that anyone can do. They're very low dollar, high value, very quick. Usually a risk assessment takes like 2 weeks and you'll know where you're at. And now you can take a risk-based approach to spending that money or developing that budget or allocating those resources or defining that next job, that new hire that you've got approval for one person. What should it be? Well, let's look at our risk and see if we can hire somebody to help us with this risk. It's a lot different than the old days of physical security where you just had to be more physically secure than your neighbor, right? Go break into that house. Well, cyber is too ambiguous. Bad guys don't know how secure you are until they start looking. And it's when they start looking that they figure out you've got risks, and this is how big of a company you are, and this is what we think we can benefit from you financially or through extortion or trading information. That's a big, and Hollywood again doesn't help us here. That's a big misconception that companies of any size don't think that they're a target. Nobody's a target until the bad guys start searching for a target. And when they find one, they've got to actually do some reconnaissance and understand what they found to determine. It's kind of like you caught a fish. To some degree, you can tell if it's a big fish or not, but you have no idea what's on the end of that hook until you reel it in. And that's kind of how bad guys operate. They're out there trying to catch fish all day long. And when one's on the line, they've got to do some work to figure out what they've caught. And that work, even if you're a small company, could end up pretty impactful for you.
Sure. And one thing I do want to piggyback on, you talked about a BIA and, a risk assessment. And I just want to distinguish a little bit between those for the audience that sometimes people come in and do kind of a simple risk assessment that's, hey, let me look at your technology and figure out if there's issues, where a business impact assessment says, hey, the most important thing is the business. It's the company, the processes, how we get revenue, all of those kinds of things. So it's looking at it in some ways from a slightly different view. I know sometimes people miss miss the technical approach versus the business approach, and the prioritization is a little bit different in that. BI tends to be a little bit more comprehensive in some of those kinds of things. I know I did one is about 20 years ago or so, but the organization was 5 minutes away from DFW, and their biggest concern is we don't want our data center to go down. And I'm like, you're within minutes of the third busiest airport. That's a risk factor for you. I understand if you don't want to weigh it that heavily or not, but it was enough that they ended up diversifying the data centers and getting their geographical separation. And so sometimes just looking at the business side versus looking at the pure technical side can yield different results.
Absolutely. Yep.
Let's see. The next thing I want to talk to you about, I guess I think of the heart, kind of a performance metric, is we're going to talk a little bit about some different staffing programs and, ways to look at things differently. But I saw a statistic that something like 60% of SMBs cited a lack of in-house cyber expertise as their number one risk factor. What does that make you think about?
I think they're probably pretty accurate. Unless you can afford dedicated roles in cyber, you're going to be behind, because cyber, you cannot be complacent for a day, a week, an hour in cyber. Everything changes every day. And if you don't have time to keep up with it, how can you expect that your organization risks or potential vulnerabilities are addressed on a daily basis? So if I'm wearing multiple hats, cyber usually isn't a fire until it's a fire, right? You don't see the smoke, you see the fire. In all these other IT roles, you see the smoke, you smell the smoke, you hear about smoke, you get to go address it before it turns into a fire. If you're not on cyber every day, you don't see smoke, you see a fire. And that's when you get to dedicate your time to wearing your cyber hat, is when there's a fire related to cyber. The other problem with that is if I am doing network administration, help desk, writing policies, doing reporting, doing programming development, and cyber is one of my hats. Very often, cyber also constitutes all the controls around cyber. So secure coding, secure network design and topology, firewall rules, running vulnerability assessments, and making sure we're addressing the findings, the vulnerabilities we found. Well, if you're also responsible for those things, there's probably a little bit of bias or objectivity issues there. Sure. That maybe you're not going to report because you don't have time to deal with those. So you found them and you're like, you know what, I'll report on that once I have time to fix it. And so all that stuff is delayed. It's not real time to management from a monitoring or governance perspective. And then just, I think the biggest impact is if you don't have time to dedicate to cyber, you've already diminished your value in mitigating those risks.
Now, I think you used the phrase behind, that you're behind on things. Is there any way an executive in an organization would know whether they're behind or not? Or are there criteria or checklists
Sure.
or things other than, my guy probably doesn't have enough time that you would recommend they think about?
One of the easiest ways, and I know executives at least listen to the news, and whether that's news radio on your drive or your favorite news station or the Wall Street Journal or whoever it is, pick any one of those cybersecurity stories, and there's one every day, and just ask your IT cyber person about it. How does this impact us? What do we have to worry about? And they should know that doesn't affect us, or it does, and this is what we're doing about it. If they can't answer those questions that fast, then they're not focused on it.
I love that.
Because
you don't have
a
to be
cyber
technical,
person,
just walk in and go, hey, are we protected?
Yep, it can just be that simple. But a cyber person that's dedicated and passionate about cyber is that's the first thing you do when you get up. You're like, what's happening? What happened overnight? What's happening right now? And how do I need to pivot and adjust or address that? Or what can I learn from it?
Yeah, definitely. That's I think that's one of the big things that people should take away. Kind of what can I learn from it? Even that particular attack, like while we're recording this, there's a big AWS outage. That may not affect me because I'm not an AWS participant, whatever your small business is. But if you're using another vendor, Azure or else, what are my risks out of this particular outage? What are the things I need to take away from it? How could I grow my reliability or security or whatever the threat is that's out there, for my organization based on what's going out there? I think is an important thing to take away.
Absolutely. Yep. Similar. I mean, we can relate cyber to the real world every day in just about every way you can think of. And so if we think of AWS being attacked or the issue with them overnight as someone, driving off the street and into their front door, then, Oracle or Google or Microsoft next door, well, we don't want that to happen to us. So we're going to put, a tree or some cement ballards in our front yard so you can't drive through our front door. So to that point, exactly. That's how you see organizations or even city municipalities mature over time. It's because they've experienced something, whether it was observed or to them directly, that caused that change.
Yeah, definitely. That's where your comment of experience versus maybe education, that you're going to prefer that person who's been through a lot of different things, that 30-year veteran, that person who it's not so much that they've always been right, but they have that experience of seeing all the different things that have gone on, both right and wrong, are able to kind of lay in and kind of advise in a way that makes sense.
Yeah, it takes seeing what went wrong a few times to understand how to do things right, or at least better. Absolutely.
Yeah, I like to say I'm a tangential thinker, that I see one thing, but it always makes me think of something else. And I think the longevity, also a 30-year veteran, the longevity of being in IT so long is, I feel like I've got a great sense of the interrelatedness of things. When I first got started, it was just about networking. Then when I got into cybersecurity, it's like, networking is enabling, cybersecurity is not. Now I need to blend the two together and figure out, all those little interrelationship points, that are decision points for me as a leader, manager, coach, advisor, whatever it happens to be. And it just takes time to make those connections with each other.
And I think that's a good point too, because you can learn a lot from books. Book knowledge, book smart. You can read all the study guides and theoretical, conceptual, even war stories. I mean, those are probably one of the more valuable things to spend your time on, learning from others' mistakes and triumphs. But if you've never actually done it, it's a lot different. I can watch a video on how to ride a motorcycle. I can listen to people tell me how to do it right. It's just like riding a bicycle with a motor on it. So you've got, so I can spend some time. I'm a quick learner. Guarantee you, when I get on that motorcycle, I'm going to wreck. And that's what people want to know. They want to know that you've been through a wreck. and you know how to, you taught yourself or you've gotten enough experience to ride that motorcycle. They don't want you to do it the first time with them.
Yeah, and I think, I kind of like your train of thought around, war stories. And, I might also put up their peers that, if you're going through a program, if you're going through training, if you're in an industry, if you work for a company, start to cultivate peers, other people you can talk to and interact with and share with. I know that you're well known in the DFW area and, beyond, just your willingness to sit down and have a conversation. That's how we ended up meeting. I've always appreciated that about you, that ability to be a peer on both ends and your willingness to learn and share. And, I think that people have been around a while, that lessons kind of, in all of us. And so that for new people, if you're getting started, if you're looking for a program, also look for peers in your class and your company and your relationships and your training, even people you meet going to take tests or whatever, all those peers are additional information that add to your weight if you're willing to form that relationship.
Absolutely agree. Networking in this field is huge.
And then the last thing, strategy metric. Is there anything, think of that as weight? Weight isn't directly say anything about your body, but sometimes there's something that is a strategy that, everything kind of flows off of. Is there a number out there that you think is kind of the weight of what's going on in the staffing, hiring, cyber world?
I think there's a shift, and it's occurring slowly. I think hiring organizations, specifically the hiring managers, are becoming more frustrated with the process of saying, hey, company, I need to hire this person. And then somewhere between that and it getting posted on the internet, there's some level of translation there for any number of reasons. So maybe exactly what they wanted isn't what's out there. Some of that could be because they're not exactly sure what they wanted. But then, it could be 100 to 1,000 people applying for that job, and they're only seeing a dozen or 24 or maybe, some subset of that. Sure. And it's because of the process of filtering and AI and keyword matching and all these other things that is diluting the pool that the hiring manager ends up with. Well, then it's on the hiring manager to go through all of those, and that's frustrating too, because you'll see some really good ones, and then you talk to them, and it doesn't work out. Or how did that make it through the filter on the stack? So there's still a lot going on there with the disconnect and the process. But back to a point I want to make about networking, hiring managers and mentors go to all those networking events. So if you're looking to get into cyber, go to cyber networking events and just start talking to people. Tell them that you're getting into cyber or that you're looking for a cyber job. And more than likely, they will offer to help you or introduce you to somebody. Bob's looking for somebody right now. Susan's got an open job rec and she can't find the right people. Think you might be a good fit. Your personality is awesome. And by the way, personality goes a long way in cyber. I'd rather hire, a very focused, capable person with a good personality and good communication skills than someone that doesn't have that, but sure. Maybe, some long list of credentials. Go to your point, networking is huge. Get out there, meet people, get introduced, build your network, build your peers. You'll find a path. And if you can't, ask somebody, help me. I need help. Is there someone that can mentor me? Is there somebody that can guide me or give me some advice? And at least in the North Texas area, the cybersecurity ecosystem is hugely collaborative. And if you can't find somebody, I'll volunteer. Give me a call. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I do it all the time, and one of the things I'm passionate about, workforce development. So then the last thing I'll say about the numbers, there's still, as far as the job openings and how big this problem is, I still think it's inaccurate because I think there's overlap between IT and cyber, and there's overlap between qualified and self-disqualified people on the resource side. I think we've got enough people. There's just not alignment with that person. And some of that is internal, like who am I really and what can I do? Mm-hmm. I don't know. Or maybe I've got the wrong idea, so I'm applying for the wrong jobs, or I'm not applying for the right job. Either way you want to say that. So there's self-analysis that needs to happen on the resource side, but I think there's enough people. And on the job side, I don't think the problem is that big because there's overlap. they're not true dedicated cyber jobs. It's some compilation of other things. And so I think when you verify those two data sets, I think we're going to get a lot closer to maybe not 1-to-1, but it's definitely not as big of a problem as I think everybody's making it out to be.
Now, earlier, I heard you make reference to, I think it was something along the effect that accounting kind of has a governing body, and so they're a lot more standardized across the board. Are there any efforts to do the same thing along the cyber front?
I think there are. NICE has been around for, almost 10 years, like 7, 8, 9 years. And I think it's most recently being referred to as a different acronym. But if you search NICE cybersecurity, you'll find it. And there's lots of cool tools out there. It's funded. It will continue to be funded because that's driving qualifications and alignment into the government space. So NICE is required for job postings in the U.S. government space. So military, government service, law enforcement, all those things, those jobs have to line up with NICE. And that's also how they evaluate your promotion from, analyst 1 or junior to senior, or from one job to the other. They have to use NICE in their performance evaluation in order to you to grow in that organization. So there's that. On the private side, so that's public sector. On the private side, the focus is mostly on experience. So less on academic training development and more on how do we get people more experience so that they're either, maybe they're in their 2-year degree or their 4-year degree. How do we get them 2 or 4 years of experience while they're in their degree so when they graduate, they've got both? Or how do we get high school students hands-on experience? So, because there's a ton of people out there that just, college isn't for them. For whatever reason, economically or just mentally, they're smarter than college, and they learn differently. So how do we get people that are qualified and capable out of high school directly into the workforce? And so I think the focus now on the private sector is developing programs to get people experience while they're learning. Go learn the theoretical conceptual stuff in some formalized program, whether that's high school or college, and then find a way to apply what you're learning in a real world hands-on situation, whether it's an internship or a student-run security operations center or something, that when you do apply, when you're ready to apply for that job, you've got the qualifications lined up.
Now, I know in our conversations prior, you mentioned, kind of your work around internship pipelines, and I want to dive into that. But also, I just want to throw out there that, we're talking primarily about cybersecurity, but there could be other things. There are other internships and apprenticeship programs, and some of these may be ways that you could do things in your business away from cyber. But today, I do want to focus, kind of your expertise, around the things that you're doing, and hear a little bit more about the pipelines that you've been able to cultivate in your time in the area.
Sure. I mentioned I've been a college professor for 26 years, so I've had a number of years observing students with this excitement that they're going to graduate their program and get a job, and have a conversation with them about, let's align that with reality and find you ways to get experience while you're in your degree. Well, that led me to start my nonprofit 15 years ago with the mission and goal of recruiting high school and college students into an internship program that lines up with real world projects, so that while they're learning in school, we can help them apply what they're learning in a real world situation. So whether that's, doing a vulnerability assessment, a risk assessment, reviewing policies and procedures, doing data forensics, investigation, open source intelligence, working in a security operations center as an analyst or an engineer or a threat hunter, all of those things, doing some IT audit and risk assessment. So I think I covered most of it. So the idea then over the years was recruit students, and we've had as many as, over 100 interns at one time. And I'll touch on why that's possible in a second, because it's formatted a little differently, I think, than a traditional internship. But then just to wrap up that thought, I'm familiar with the total number of students that have come through that program, but I do know that how many students that came through the program that we helped get jobs is just over 2,000. So in 10 years, kind of on a volunteer basis, no funding, just a passion for helping students learn, we were able to accomplish that. And the way that we accomplish that is we always partner with cybersecurity companies, audit consulting companies, doing GRC work and compliance work, forensics and incident response organizations. And so we recruit students, they apply on our website, they're screened for, how dedicated are you going to be, because there are requirements, but they're put into a cohort. So the interns actually work together as a group. They're able to leverage their strengths and support each other's weaknesses. They learn how to be leaders together, which is actually a component of the program. They have to read leadership books and do presentations on leadership. So that also works on their soft skills and presentation. And there's a very constructive feedback loop when it comes to soft skills among the interns. They help each other there. And then they build relationships with cybersecurity professionals. We align that with what their interests are. So they may come to us and say, I want to be a hacker one day. Okay, well, let's talk through that, and let me introduce you to a hacker, and you'll have a discussion. And more than likely, they changed their mind. Yeah, I don't want to be a hacker anymore. I want to be an analyst or do forensics. So we help them, first of all, understand where their interests are, but how does that line up with who they are and whether that really resonates with them as a career path or a job. And because those jobs are vastly different in a lot of cases. And so is your lifestyle. If you want to be a hacker, you're probably not a muscular bodybuilder going to competitions and spending a lot of time with your family. And, most of those guys work at night. They eat junk food and drink Red Bull and don't like to talk to other people.
And they respond to emails at 3 a.m.
Right. And so, if that's not the kind of person you are, then let's talk about some alternative, focus. And some disciplines. And so we get into that. And so tier one is really exposing them, tier one of our program, exposing them to a lot of the different disciplines and opportunities in cyber to help them understand what resonates with them. And then they have to do a presentation to us that they really get it. Like, I want to do this thing, and here's why, and this is what I think my can be, and all that good stuff. So then tier two is when we focus on that discipline, or maybe two. We've got some options. It's one of these. But we spend a lot of time in tier two helping them develop into that role. And that's where we assign them a mentor from industry. So it could be, like State Farm Insurance or Raytheon or Texas Instruments or Toyota. Whoever it might be that we know does that job, we'll ask if they would volunteer to mentor this person. And then as those mentors give us feedback in the intern program about the progress of this individual, we become more comfortable that they're capable of doing whatever that job is. And at that point, we start giving them real world things to demonstrate their capability, but also that has enhanced their passion in that job. Like, I did it and I'm excited about that, or I did it and I didn't like it, right? And one of the things that we see with pen testing, as an example, everybody wants to run the tools and break into a network. But then when it comes to writing the report and going through all the data, they're like, I don't want to do that.
Yeah.
That real world application really solidifies their direction. And then if all of that lines up, we consider that a tier 3 intern, which we consider operational. So that's where we are actively helping them look for jobs. If we get a project or our ecosystem, partners and people we know get a project and need help, those are the people that we that can help with that work. And so they getting real world money doing that kind of stuff. And so in that program, even though it's like it's a pretty long road, we've had interns go through that program in 6 weeks and get jobs. We've had interns go through that program over a year and a half or 2 years and then get a job. And we've got interns that have come through the program, they've pushed pause and taken a job, and then they've come back, and then they've pushed pause and taken a job. And so it's kind of a come and go thing. But it really is, and this is one of the things that we tell interns, it's what you make it. You'll get out of it what you put into it. And if you're dedicated to learning and growing, then you'll learn and grow faster. If you have the resources and the time, we understand people have home lives and the need to have a job and do other things. But when you put in it what you can, as often as you can, in a dedicated, consistent manner, you'll be successful at it.
I think that's a great point that When I think of this industry, I think of it as the ultimate meritocracy. If you just want to show up and work 8 to 5, hey, there's a spot for you. But if you're also going to be on call and work weekends, there's more opportunities. If you're also going to write reports, there's more opportunities. If you're also going to be able to sit in front of executives and explain in their terms, there's going to be more opportunities. That there's something for somebody everywhere along the way. It's just, if you're a yes and kind of person, if you're going to get expertise and certifications, if you're going to do 8 to 5 and weekends, if you're going to do this and that, if you're going to train yourself and yourself to be a lifelong learner, then there's there for you, whatever you want. You just have to decide who you want to be and where you want to fit, and all those different opportunity areas to decide where you're going to be.
I've got a real quick story. So I'm the guy, he retired from the military. He was a corpsman in the Navy. And so when he got out, he just into a field that was comfortable for him. So he became a nurse and ended up doing sleep studies on the weekend. So he only worked 3 days a week, but it was 24 hours a day for 3 days supervising people in these sleep studies. Mm-hmm. And he did that for some period of time, and he did it. And so he needed to look for a change. People suggested he go into cyber. He ended up in one of my classrooms as a freshman, and just became enamored with it. It's like, I to do cyber. What can I do? I invited him into our intern program, and between classes and the internship, he tried everything. He did forensics. He did some vulnerability assessments. He did risk assessment work. And he did good on documentation. But at one point, he just came to me and said, Mike, I don't think I will ever be technical enough to do all these different jobs. But one of the things that he did really well, and he was with me for probably 8 or 10 months at this point. Okay. What he did really well was build relationships with all of the other interns and all of the other employees. And one of the things that I observed and got feedback from others on was his ability to communicate with everybody in a way that resonated with that person. Sure. In other words, maybe there's a on the team and he works, nights and weekends, 36 hours straight, and he doesn't come in the next day. And so hey, where's Sean? Is Sean okay? He already knows the answer. Yep, Sean's at home. He's sleeping. I've already checked on him, made sure he ate dinner, and he's safe. And I was like, wow, that's something we don't overlook, is the ability to manage and care for cyber or even technical people in general. IT people, for the most part, are we've got different personalities. Or some of us are socially awkward, introverted. We don't like talking to other people. We do prefer working in the dark, but we understand that I've got to let people know I'm okay. You haven't seen me for 3 days. I'm working. I sent an email and said I'm still alive. I'm going to crash for a day or so, and I'll be back at it. So this guy developed a skill of how to manage very technical people and technical teams while also giving good feedback to management about their status, any issues, things that they found, things that the client might want to know. And I was like, that is amazing. And so I actually hired him full time to do that job. And he eventually became a chief operating officer at a cybersecurity company.
Nice.
So amazing. And so I think to your point, and I said it before too, there's a job in cyber for everybody. You've just got to find the right path and the right people to work with to help you figure that out.
That's so true. I used to joke with my wife that if we went to a party, everyone would swear she was their best friend at the end of the party, and talk about her favorably for the next few months. And if I went to the same party, I'd talk to 2 people, but they'd be friends for life. It's just different people. You always had fun together, always did things, but there's somebody for everyone. You just have to figure out kind of where your safety spot is, or your happy place. If you're a Happy Gilmore fan, you got to find your happy place and stay there.
Right.
Now, we're coming up near the end of our time, but before we do, I'm just kind of curious. What do you think the mismatch is between candidates and the industry this day? Is everyone just looking for a unicorn, or what's going on?
I think there are a lot of cases where there's a unicorn hunt going on, but that's by one budget. Usually, I can only hire one person. And 2, not a real clear definition of what that position is supposed to or intended to do. And so I alluded to earlier that, things get convoluted and the word gets kind of muddy between the person that needs to hire somebody and the person that's responsible for screening and posting the job and that kind of thing. And so what gets in the way is all this HR stuff. And so if hiring somebody and I say, hey, HR, I need to hire an analyst and I want to pay them $60,000 a year, HR is going to go, okay, well, let me look that up. The salaries in North Texas for an analyst are 55 to 65, just as an example. And they go, and so they call me back and go, all right, you said you want to pay 60 for entry level person, but the top of the pay range for an analyst is 65. So if you want to pay 60, I know you said no experience or maybe a year of experience. Maybe we bump that up to 3 or 5 so they would get more of a senior person. So in years or a year and a half, however long, when they get that pay raise, we're able to put them in a analyst 2 job because they're going to be at the top of the pay range and we're not going to be able to pay them anymore unless they get promoted, right? So there's that. Or then there's the, hey, HR, I need an IT person that knows networking, but I also need a cybersecurity person that can do vulnerability scans and they understand how to help us be compliant on the cybersecurity parts of these things. So HR goes, yeah, that sounds like an analyst. That sounds like a GRC, whatever. So they just to change the job title based on the objectives and the role. And then now new job title, new ranges and all these other things, new qualifications. And that's our normal company. But what if I'm a regulated company like in healthcare or I work for the government? So now I've got to be certified in something or maybe I work for an accounting firm and I'd have to have a bachelor's degree or I want to go work for law enforcement. So I think there's still a lot of issues that go on between the hiring person saying I need somebody and then whoever's responsible for figuring out the company side of that, the HR side of that, and then posting it. So there's that. And then definitely on the job seeker side, I think it's starting to come down a little as far as those misconceptions of pay. It's been a while since I've seen something outrageous, but I see the behavior of some people looking for jobs. I interviewed somebody on a conference call. I think it was a Teams call, and we were interviewing him for a job. And his video comes on, and all of a sudden he jumps back on his bed. He's wearing a T-shirt. And he's got his bag of goldfish, and he's just eating goldfish on his bed during a job interview. And I'm like, so very quickly I said, listen, we're probably not going to hire you, but let's spend some time. Would you mind if I coached you a little bit on the appropriate, being professional and the appropriateness of, behavior on a job interview. So that was constructive, I think, at the end, but I think there is still some misconception and some misaligned expectations, both on the work-life balance. Like, I don't want to work 8 to 5. I don't want to work 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. I don't want to work nights and weekends. So there's this, I don't want to, but at the same time, they're looking for an opportunity to get their foot in the door. Like, how do I get a job in cyber? Well, you have to do those things you say you don't want to do because everybody else didn't want to do it either, but it's still required for somebody to do that job. And guess what? You're the kind of the low man on the totem pole. You're the new guy. You're the probationary period. And what better way to show that you're dependable and reliable and can do your work than being the lone person on a night shift? I mean, that's part of the process.
So I'm gonna call that the HR holy grail. It's for it. Nobody's found the right position, but you're not going to be it if you're laying in your bed eating a goldfish. You'll be King Arthur. So that's right. The HR holy grail.
There you go.
All right. Well, now that we're kind of to the end, I kind of want to start kind of wrapping it up. So we've talked about a lot of different things, Mike, but if there was one big takeaway that you wanted our audience, which is primarily small business executives, if there's one big takeaway you wanted them to take away from it, what would you say that should be for them?
Find a trusted advisor. So it doesn't have to be the person that helps you solve the problems. They just need to be kind of that beard that knows what your questions are, where your pain points are, and they can help point you in the right direction.
Do they actually have to have a beard that's gray, or is that because that eliminates me and it throws you in there? Just checking.
Yeah, Grayberg is just a conceptual term, but yeah, most of the time when it's kind of your oracle that you want them to be able to do this while they're thinking, but or Gandalf, but quite though, find a trusted advisor. Somebody that's going to have a conversation with you. If it turns into a long-term relationship, or you call them when you need something, great, but at least you know who to call. And that's one of the things I harp on a lot is wait until the fire starts to start looking for the people you need to help put the fire out. Start research today. Go to an event. And there's tons of events, like I mentioned, the Information Systems Security Association, or the ISSA. They have luncheons every week. It's open to the public. ISACA, International Society of Audit and Compliance, they have luncheons every month also. There's a Twitter account called DFW InfoSec, I think is what it is. And they actually publish a calendar of every day of every month of what's going on in North Texas. And there literally is something going on every week, happy hour, an event, and just get involved. If you're an executive and you don't know anything about cyber, just get involved and find a buddy, find a conference buddy, find a lunch buddy, and you're not even paying for that. That's just a relationship you and somebody you can ask questions of. And if that turns into a fractional, chief information or information security officer role or advisor role, where you're just paying them, hour here, hour there per month to advise you, well, guess what? That also helps on your insurance, because that insurance questionnaire is going to have a question about, do you have an advisor? Do you have a role for, a couple $100 a month? That's going to reduce your premiums and be a resource for you when you smell smoke.
So true. No one can be an expert at everything. And, I think, even Tiger Woods has a coach. So, if you're trying to be the best at what you do, having those people you can count on in different areas can go a long way.
For sure.
Now, I think you've kind of given us a little bit of a class kind of in aligning, education, experience with education, internships, apprenticeships, those kinds of things. Are there any prescriptions or things that you'd recommend to the audience to kind of help them along their way?
Well, one of the big things I harp on a lot is find your battle buddy in cyber before you start investing a lot of time and money. I know so many people that went to 2-year school, 4-year school, paid for all the certifications, and then they end up doing something completely different. So they wasted a lot of time and money in order to figure things out. So find your battle buddy now. Go find somebody. And again, I'll happy to volunteer with the time of helping you figure out based on who you are and what you want to do. Let's develop a plan so that well, do you really have to go to college? Do you need to take that certification? Or which certification should you focus on based on where you think you want to go? And the plan. So that's my biggest piece of advice, and I tell that to people all day, because they ask, what certification should I get? Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. Well, then I don't get a certification. Figure it out first before you invest time and money.
Along that lines, I would also say, if you're an entry-level person seeking out, consider those entry-level IT jobs and, SMBs. Everyone wants to go to work for a big organization where you kind of get into a very regimented role. But sometimes if you're working at a small business, managed services provider or whatever, you get the ability to touch a lot of different things and build that foundational knowledge as a network engineer that you're going to need to be a security engineer.
And it doesn't have to be a paid position. Volunteer at church, volunteer for Goodwill or Salvation Army or a nonprofit hospital. Go volunteer. They're shorthanded and they would love an extra set of hands and someone to teach, and that's a great way to get something on your resume.
Awesome. Well, Mike, thank you for your time today. I know you kind of threw out the offer to be available to people. Do you want to share some of your contact information so that people know how to reach you?
The best way would be LinkedIn. So just search Mike Saylor on LinkedIn. You're going to find a guy that looks kind of like this, maybe a little shorter beard and a suit. But I'm the CEO for Blackswan Cybersecurity, Executive Director for the Cyber Defense Center. So either one of those websites. And the Cyber Defense Center is cyberdefensecenter.org. And then blackswancybersecurity.com. So any of those three websites would get you to me, and that's probably the best way to do it.
And we'll make sure and get the links in the show notes so that you can reach them through there. For myself, you can also reach out to me as well. Just some other groups. C Squared also has a community for people, North Central Texas crime. There's actually like a little bit more of a social group that the vendors put on, one in Dallas, one in Fort Worth, where I know I've met a few students at those. I think he didn't mention InfraGard, but InfraGard is another one of those communities. B-sides, lots. That's a great thing about Dallas Fort Worth. There's a lot of great communities in the area, and as Mike said, all you have to do is do a little bit of searching, and you can find one that's a fit for you. But you can also reach me at the doctor at fulcrumgroup.net, all spelled out, the doctor. If you Google nice, it shows my picture. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just playing off of Mike's comment earlier. And you can also find me on LinkedIn. Now, I only link up with people I've met face-to-face or that I do business with. So if you're finding me through the podcast, make sure you mention that you're reaching out via the podcast, because normally I don't link up with people unless we've had some sort of communication. I hate sock puppets. I hate, just all the invites, trying to figure out who I know and who really don't know. Well, that brings us to the end of our doctor's appointment. Hope you're feeling a little bit better, Mike. I'm feeling better. All that you shared with us today. I think you kind of threw out there that the cure for kind of the cyber talent gap isn't, it's not just more technology, like how you brought across. It's also, kind of listening, mentoring, communicating better. I think across business, education, and IT, one of our core values is actively listen and communicate. So I think it kind of leans into that a little bit, that, when you understand people, we can do more with things. And, I kind of think that's kind of what Mike's saying today, that, know who you are, have the right HR roles, look for those internship, apprenticeship programs, and, you'll be a stronger, safer business. Find that mentor who actually listens to kind of help you along in your journey. That's all I have. I'm your host. Make sure you subscribe to Talk to the Doc wherever you get your podcasts, and the doctor is out. Thanks so much, Mike. We'll see you next time. Take care. Thanks for being our guest today.
Yes, sir.